afraid of the dark.
I used to work as a plumber for a company. I'm 28 years old, single. The call came in towards evening. It was just me and one of my coworkers. Since I lived relatively close to the place of the order, it was decided to send me, arguing that I wouldn't be on the grounds that I wouldn't be confused by the terrain. That day, absolutely everything was falling apart for me. My shift was coming to an end, and I had to go to the other side of town, order across town, and then coming back to the office and turn in the form. To put it mildly, I didn't feel like it. After a brief argument with my coworker, I finally agreed, but I noted to myself that I'd go straight home after the job was done. The manager gave me the addresses of the services that the client needed. A standard set of clog removal and leaks. Admittedly, it cheered me up at the time, because, as described earlier, it's a 3-minute job. All that good cheer was immediately shattered by a huge traffic jam in which I stood for an exaggerated 2 hours. In spite of all the difficulties, I was spared the regular calls from the manager, who usually in such situations, "Why the hell haven't you gotten there? Why the hell aren't you there?" And in the end, I was only able to get out of traffic when it got pretty dark outside. After circling the area for a while, I finally managed to pull into a small courtyard that was barely illuminated by a single working streetlight. After struggling to park the car, I stepped outside. The customer's house was an ordinary brick built in the 70s. The front door was luckily open, so I didn't have to call anyone to remind me of the code. Taking all my arsenal, I went inside. At about the 4th floor level, the customer lived on the 5th floor. On the 5th floor, there was a very nasty and strange odor, and as I got closer to the customer's apartment, it just got stronger. It was a cross between a failed attempt to boil some kind of drug, the odor of a rotten, boiled corpse that was used in rotten eggs. It takes a very long time to achieve. Interesting, but I knew for sure, if odors, smells had colors, this one was dark green. A minute later, I was standing in front of a door with the worn number 46 on it, and I pressed the bell. And yes, as you can easily guess, it was this apartment. The most stinky stench was coming from this apartment. The door was opened by a man of average height, about 40 years old. He was wearing a plaid red shirt, brown pants with suspenders, house slippers, and glasses on his face. Pretty quickly and succinctly, the man explained that the odor had been coming in yesterday morning and hadn't let up since. At first, he thought it was a burst pipe and that it was all over the house. But when he went down to help his neighbor this afternoon, it was only on his floor. He decided to come to us right after his neighbor's first gentle plea to stop making chemistry, or the police would be here soon. The smell itself was coming from the toilet, assuring the man that he wouldn't have to explain himself to the cops, and the smell would be gone in a couple minutes. Arsenal of tools headed for the 1 meter by 2 meter toilet room. Of course, I've never encountered odors like this before. I'd ever encountered before, but it was more than normal. Usually in these situations, you just have to look at the cistern to see if there's a dead rat or rat, and check the pipes as a last resort. But when I went into the bathroom, I literally almost cried. And gagged. It smelled 3 times worse in here than I'd experienced in the apartment. Plus, it was cutting into my eyes. I don't know how the guy was in here without a gas mask for more than a minute. Personally, without my hand on my nose, I couldn't breathe at all. First thing I did was check the tank, like I wanted to. I found no dead animals, however. An equally interesting detail caught my eye. At first, I thought the tuk-tuk had fallen over unusually. But no, the water in the cistern was greenish in color, and near the bottom, it was pink in color. To say that I was shocked is to say nothing. It was the first time I had ever encountered such a thing. The water should be rusty, yellow at most, but not green. Not green, much less pink. At that point, being in the bathroom at that point. I flew out of there, closed the door, and breathed in the less dirty air. A little more and I would have passed out for sure. My mind was spinning. I had a million questions, but there were 2 things I was most interested in. What the hell is this shit? And why didn't the man say anything about the color of the water? I had no desire to be here for even few more minutes. After standing by the toilet for a while, I decided to take a quick look around again. And if I couldn't find the source of the cloudy water, I'm going to chemically plug the clog, if you can call it that. I'll also tighten a couple screws for show, and then I'm good to go home. I even wanted to charge only 50% of the service, because I wasn't sure if the clog was even breakable, with as much air in my lungs as possible. Of air, I went back to the restroom. First, I flushed the cistern 3 times. I made sure the flush valve was working properly. The only thing that was disconcerting was the green water residue. Otherwise, it worked perfectly, after filling the cistern with baking soda and a couple other things. Of baking soda and a couple of other things, I decided to check the drain. I opened the lid of the toilet, and I was pretty shocked. Just like the cistern, there was green water, but whereas in the cistern the water at the bottom was just a pinkish color, but in the cistern the water at the bottom was just a pinkish tinge. This slime was stuck right by the hole. A good mood that day. And we have a good relationship. I got depressed in my life. Cigarettes back into my life. In those 7 days I never went outside, I didn't eat much. My brain didn't want to believe that what my grandmother said was real. A couple of times my coworkers came to visit me, and we sang Polish Tincture. I didn't tell anyone about what happened. It was physically difficult to even think about it, because during that whole period, I had the same nightmare. I'm sitting in my first customer's kitchen, and I see something inhuman crawling out of the toilet, and starts walking slowly toward me. By the 6th day off, I was feeling a lot better, but I didn't get back to work to go back to work after 3 more days. I started only going out on jobs with someone else, although that's the only way I should be working when installing a bathtub or a toilet. It's a good thing that with me in my condition, no one really objected to it. A month went by, everything went back to normal, and I was able to work alone again. More than once, the thought crossed my mind, I wondered if Grandma was just crazy. She told me all kinds of crazy stuff that she'd been told the demon on her shoulder told her. And I reacted so violently. Eventually, I came to believe it myself, and I started working quietly, just like before. A week ago, I was working the night shift. I was working the night shift with 2 coworkers. It starts at 8 o'clock. At about 9 o'clock, we received a call from somewhere in Cleveland to remove an old bathtub and install a new one. It's long and complicated, and it's recommended to work in pairs because it's hard to drag it in alone. In the end, I was left in the office alone in the office and decided to take a nap. At 10:26 p.m. I remembered the time exactly. The manager woke me up. An order had come in. It's not hard to guess from which street. However, my fears were quickly allayed as the address was different from that house. I already knew it by heart. Besides, he was a regular customer, and no one had ever gone missing. The only service he asked for was to fix a clog, and he was paying in 2 installments, so I couldn't refuse. The customer's house was at the very end of the street. As I drove by that house, I caught a glimpse of her, and a chill ran down my spine. I almost drove into the fence. There were no lights on in any of the windows. At the same time, the building was sealed up, and from the only thing that distinguished it from an abandoned house was the window frames. In an instant, the anxiety returned, but it was too late to go back. I promised myself that if I smelled even the slightest hint of that odor, I'd drop everything and leave immediately. The customer lived in a panel 9-story building on the 2nd floor. It was relatively new, by the way, and not as ugly as most developments in this country. There was even a working intercom. I dialed the number of the apartment, and within seconds I was standing in the entryway. Having thoroughly sniffed, I didn't notice any odor. For obvious reasons, I took the stairs, but even there, it was clean. The door was opened by a guy my age. He was wearing a blue t-shirt and black shorts. We went into the kitchen. The guy poured me some juice and started describing the problem. Like a couple hours ago, the push stopped flushing. The guy decided not to delay and called us right away. He's got a party tomorrow, and talking about that there was a clog in the toilet would be very embarrassing. Next thing you know, I'm gonna need to clear my nose as soon as I get out. You can start. He retired to the bathroom. Yes, the bathroom, not the bathtub. Turns out people can live like that. I was really stuck on my phone and I didn't immediately notice the customer's 20-minute absence. I don't think anyone on this planet clears their nose for 20 minutes or more. Realizing this, fear slowly began to creep up on me. Anything could happen, up to and including cardiac arrest. I got up from the chair and headed towards the bathroom, which was in the hallway across from the open balcony. As I approached it, I noticed that there was no light, but I remembered the flick of a switch. When I got close to the door, I pressed my ear against the wall, and listened. Having heard nothing before, I was pretty sure that the guy had just gotten sick and the light, I don't know, short-circuited. As I touched the doorknob, my hearing having been fully engaged for a decent amount of time, strange noises behind the door. I took my hand away and listened. They sounded more like guttural sounds mixed with some kind of slurping. I cursed myself 1,000 times for not paying attention. I opened the door abruptly, prepared to administer first aid to the man. Almost immediately, the familiar stinky odor hit my nose. Although the bathroom was dark, but the light from the lantern by the balcony was enough to illuminate half the room. Near the jerk, who was standing in the corner, the customer was lying with his pants down. His throat was all bloody, and as if chewed, and on top of him sat and a creature was sitting on him, slowly eating his eyes. Yes, literally a creature, no more and no less. There's no other way to call it. The only thing this thing had in common with a human being only had legs, arms, and a head. Other than that, it was a pathetic parody of a human being. Pink skin with no hair, covered with some kind of growths, unnaturally bent knees, and hands with 3 fingers. This one had a round mouth and a microscopic nose. Clearly angry at me for interrupting the meal, this thing rose from its feet in an instant and emitting a meek, inhuman snarl, and with slow strides came toward me. How it could see without eyes could see was the last thing on my mind. I stood still for a few seconds, unsure of what to do. But soon my brain seized upon the only adequate idea that came to mind: the balcony. It was open. I'd never been good at jumping. Now, however, I had clearly outdone myself. I landed on the ground from the second floor. I didn't hit anything. When I turned around, I saw this creature standing a little farther away from the balcony window. We played peekaboo for a couple seconds, but then it disappeared into the back of the apartment.